We are very grateful to our sponsor this evening. More Able Than This is sponsored by the Music Department at Georgia College and State University. In addition to bachelor's degrees in music and in music therapy, including a BA plus MAT path to initial music teacher certification, GCSU offers an online master's degree in music education for certified teachers seeking to improve or expand their knowledge and skills, as well as a hybrid Master of Arts in Teaching degree for those seeking initial teacher certification in Georgia. We accept certified and licensed teachers from across the U.S., and Georgia certification is reciprocal with most other states. So don't let state boundaries deter you from applying. Apply now to start in spring or summer 2025. For more information about these degree programs, contact me at tina.holmes-davis@gcsu.edu. That's tina.holmes-davis@gcsu.edu. Welcome to More Able Than This, the podcast where we discuss everything related to disability and music education. Today we will be talking about the One-Handed Musical Instrument Trust with our special guest, Rachel Wolfson. Rachel is the General Manager of the One-Handed Musical Instrument Trust located in Birmingham, UK. And she's going to tell us about their mission and the things they're doing to let musicians with upper limb deficiencies play instruments and, participate in music despite their upper limb deficiencies. So Georgia College and State University, Georgia's designated public liberal arts university. It's going to be one of those nights. Okay, we are sponsored by Georgia College and State University, Georgia's designated public liberal arts university, through the Center for Music Education at Georgia College. All right, so thank you for being with us tonight, Rachel. And so did you start OMI, or did someone else start it? How did it get started?
OMI was started in 2011. It wasn't started by me. It was started by a man called Stephen Hetherington, and Stephen had a daughter who was born with cerebral palsy. He was a professional musician. She went to school and asked if she could play something, and the school said because of her cerebral palsy, which gave her a left-sided weakness, that there was nothing she could play. He didn't think that was the best outcome of the conversation.
Of course.
And so he started looking at what was out there, and OMI was born out of that. I came on board a couple of years later, but also from a similar perspective, because I was a secondary school music teacher, and I had a son, and when he was 2 he had a stroke, so he's got a right-sided weakness, and so sort of music and parenting and all that came in and made this a good job.
Yes. So when did y'all start the competition for building instruments that are playable with one hand?
Yeah, so the first round of the competition was in 2013. We ran it every year for a few years, and then we've run it every couple of years more recently. The first ever winner of the competition has 3 categories. So one category is about instruments, and the rule is that they have to be able to do exactly what a regular instrument can do, but without the use of one hand or arm. And then we have a second category for enabling apparatus. So that's anything that allows a regular instrument to be played, so stands, harnesses, that sort of thing. And then we have a category for concepts. So we have people who have bright ideas, but perhaps not the technical prowess to pull them off, or the money, or whatever is needed. But just getting those ideas down in some format can get the instruments out, which is what we're all trying to do.
Yes. And so y'all started that in 2013?
Yeah, first ever competition was 2013, and the first ever winner was from the US, the lovely David Knabb, with his 100 saxophone, which was created with him and Jeff Sterling.
I didn't realize I knew he had won. I didn't realize he
Yeah,
was the first winner.
very first winner. Very
Yes.
first winner.
So that's so exciting, and so many musicians around the world are now able to play because y'all are sponsoring that kind of innovative thought that we don't always have an outlet for. People have these ideas, but they don't always have somewhere to put it. And
Yeah.
y'all have you have a rental scheme where people in the UK can rent.
People in the UK and the US. I'm constantly shipping instruments to the US and Canada and Ecuador and all sorts of places as well. Yeah, we do. I think the one thing with the competition in the early days was it was generally the instruments that came through the competition were instruments that were developed for somebody who'd been able to play a regular instrument and then couldn't. So life got in the way and they couldn't. And then after a period of time, we built up some instruments or awareness of being able to get some instruments. And then we started to look at, okay, this is great for those people, but what about the children who never get started because they're born with their condition and they just get written out of music before, however that happens in the classroom or in instrumental sessions or whatever, because the instruments don't exist or aren't known about, that they need to be able to use in school.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been working on that since 2015. We started our first Music Makers program.
Outstanding. This is amazing. We don't really have the nonprofit-led push in the United States that y'all seem to have in the UK. Our innovation in this area seems to be led at the university level.
Yes, and but it's good to have some. Yeah, it's good to have university input because you've got people who can be objective about things and can get their work published so that people can read about it and find out more about it. But it does also need some people on the ground who are a bit more hands-on making the instruments, because universities are often an expensive way of getting to a finished product, and they don't have the manufacturing capabilities of repeating. They're interested in novel work and not the repeatability of, I've designed this clarinet, great, but now I need 10 of them. That's not where you're going to sit happily in a university research.
So yeah, I think that it's an exciting balance because in the United States, even at the university level, the instruments that we're seeing are made for or by people who need to use them. Like David Knabb. There is a flute player, and I apologize for not remembering her name, at the Columbus State University in Georgia. And she had an accident of some kind, and so she invented a mouthpiece that allows the flute to be played at a lower angle because she can't reach with whichever hand, I can't remember, she can't reach up to play the flute. So she really didn't redesign the whole flute. She can play a standard flute, but she needed that mouthpiece that circled around and then came down at an angle. Yeah,
Martin Biss has made a fair few of those mouthpieces that go at different angles for slightly raised or even almost in clarinet playing position.
So. Sure. So Martin Biss, is he... where's he located?
Martin Visser, he's in Amsterdam.
I remember there's someone in the Netherlands somewhere that has a one-handed flute, a one-handed saxophone.
That's Martin.
And last time I saw, that's Martin.
That's Martin, yeah. And he's coming to our conference.
Yay, I'm so excited. So, I do remember that, there's one instrument here, one instrument here, one instrument here, but Martin had two.
Yes, that's true. Yes, he did. Yeah, he made his saxophones for Neil Duncan, who lost his arm to cancer therapy.
Yes.
He made his a soprano and a tenor saxophone, one hand.
So, are you grant funded, or how do you, or sponsored?
Yeah, grant funded. Lots of applications. Yes. Virtually exclusively grant funded, a little bit of private donation, but virtually, certainly the vast majority is grant funded. Sometimes for specific projects like our work with schools, primary schools, so specific pockets of work get the funding. Yeah.
So before we started recording, we were talking kind of about educational materials. So if someone, a teacher in the U.S., needed an instrument for one of their students, they could contact you about the rental scheme kind of thing.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then if they needed help teaching it, you would contact one of us who actually plays it and put us in contact with them.
Absolutely, either someone who plays it or someone who's already taught it. We have social media groups that people can join so they can ask questions within a group and get some feedback as well. We've got a few sort of starter sheets. So I remember the very first project we did in 2015 where we were looking at one-handed recorder playing, and there was a big debate over which notes you start on, because a lot of the books start on B, A, G, but they're the hardest notes on the one-handed instrument because they've got the keys on. And I think in the end the vast majority of people started on B, A and G because that's where the books start. So
and that allows them to play with everybody else. Yeah,
absolutely. And the materials there, you've got the books that come with the backing tracks, and the BAG pieces are easier than the FED pieces because they assume less prior knowledge before you get to those notes and that kind of thing. So we try and keep people in line as much as we can. And I think possibly the people we work with fit into two different categories. There's one category, people who've never learned a regular instrument, so what they pick up is what they know. And then there's another group of people who've had to change, having spent months, years, decades working with their regular instrument, and then they have to switch to a one-handed instrument. And I think that's a very different approach that needs to be taken, because obviously the frustration of not being able to play what you could play before is a very different situation than a child who just picks up and they learn how to play B because that's the note they're taught, and then they learn how to play A and it's all fine, and they don't know that it's different to what everyone else is doing.
Well, certainly, yeah. You don't know what you don't know, but yeah, I can confirm that, having to go back with the one-handed clarinet and not be able to play literature that I played 20 years ago was very frustrating. But I didn't have to quit.
No, you didn't have to quit. No, absolutely.
And it was actually David Nab who put me in contact with Peter about the instrument, because I saw that David had made the one-handed saxophone, so I called him to ask him if he made a clarinet, and he said no, but Peter did. Yes. So I was actually able to get my instrument that way, and I'm super grateful to y'all for it, because I think the story is Peter made the one-handed recorder and he was shocked at how excited everybody was. And I think so. Then he realized it's because we didn't have options. So then he went back and made the clarinet. Yeah,
I rang Peter about, in the middle of 2016, and I'm not a woodwind player, I'm a string player. But I said, Peter, we've got one-handed flute, saxophones and recorders. We don't necessarily have them at OMI, but they exist. What about clarinets? Everyone's always asking about clarinets. And he said, no, there's 19 keys to manage and there's 12 notes before you cross the break and it's too hard. And then 9 months later, he produced that clarinet.
Yes, he did.
9 months. He's amazing.
He can always do it. So, and I'm excited to see what he's done with 3D printing, because actually, traveling with my one-handed clarinet has been harder than I anticipated, because the first thing that the airlines want to do is put it under the plane. And no amount of this is a handmade instrument. I was actually, one time they were like, well, you're going to have to put it under the plane. I said, no, you can kick me off the flight, but you can't put this instrument under the plane. So I'm so hoping that he'll have something that might travel easier.
Yeah, this might, we'll see. There are definitely strengths in the wood instruments.
Yes, and the sound, I'm sure, he's worked so hard to make us a one-handed instrument that sounds like a professional, instrument that, I'm sure he wants to maintain that quality of sound, which I don't know anything about 3D printing, but it might not be easy.
He's 5 years ago, he knew nothing about 3D printing at all, and he's taken himself on such an amazing journey just to learn all that he could about materials and the strength of different materials and the sound of different materials and how it needs to be finished and what's realistic with key work and springs, and so he's really done an amazing research job. I went with him up to a university in Manchester to go and look at their 3D printing. He's collaborated with various people here who have got part of the puzzle but maybe not the instrument making bit.
Sure. Yes.
So yeah, he's just got an amazing mind for being able to design complex things and make them really, really proficient instruments.
And he's what y'all bring to us, because Peter might never have done this had you not existed, because he's not disabled, and he's not making it for a relative or a friend who's disabled. He's making it for the public who might be disabled because you asked him to. He
did definitely do the one-handed recorder a long time ago. That definitely predates us.
Sure.
But I think the demand for them has gone up since we've been promoting them.
Well, because now children that are born with, upper limb deficiencies are seeing themselves in music in a way that, we weren't before. No. And I was actually just downstairs talking to one of my friends who's hosting one of the All-State orchestras, and he was telling me that he was the conductor for a honor orchestra recently, and he had this one little guy on the cello who was, as I understand it, and I'm not a string person, but he was reaching for a note that he should have been playing with his third finger with his second finger, and he was terribly out of tune. And so my friend was like, "Why are you playing that with your second finger?" And he held up his hand, and he's missing that finger completely. And of course my friend felt terrible. He would have never called it out if he had known. But that child might never have been in orchestra before. Before people like you and people like David, and this kind of push that disabled musicians can still be musicians. So even though he's a little out of tune, we might need to teach him to actually shift, or whatever it is. I'm not a string player.
Shift. It's a good word. I think when I started, it was in the UK, we had the Paralympics in 2012, and disability and inclusion and all the rest of it got a bit more awareness in the people on the street, but music not so much. And I actually challenge, whenever I do talks, I actually challenge people to name me some Paralympians, and generally they reel off a whole list of them, and then you say, "Now name me some disabled musicians," and there's this kind of stunned silence, and then sometimes I get Beethoven.
Yes, well, and I mean, yes, that counts.
That's true, but so or people kind of, there's that guy that plays the piano, or that guy that plays the French horn, but they're not sort of quite as familiar with those people as as they are with the sports people. So we've got a lot of catching up to do with sports.
We do.
But I think a few years ago, even when I started, I've been at OMI for over 10 years now, it was sort of acceptable. It was sort of accepted that there was nothing they could do, so therefore that child that couldn't play, well, just give them a drum. I've literally had teachers say that, actually, even this decade, had teachers say to me, don't worry about him, just give him a drum, when everybody else is learning the trumpet. And I think as time's going on, it's becoming less and less acceptable, and it's sort of, but people don't always know what to do about it, or they don't know where to get the instruments, or they genuinely can't afford the instruments, because that is an issue, I'm not going to lie. So there's the mindset is changing, but we now need the systems to catch up a bit so that the provision is there as we need it to be.
Yes, and that's actually the purpose of this podcast, is because I see so many teachers, as a music education professor, of course, that's what I do, and they want to teach everyone. They just, they don't know what to do when, somebody who has an upper limb deficiency shows up for band or orchestra class. If they knew what to do, if they had resources, they would do it. They just don't.
Yes.
So,
and I think when you talk to people, and when you talk to teachers, and you start talking about if I tell people what I do for my job, for example, you'll often get this response in the UK, I don't know about the US, about oh yes, we do this project in the special schools. Now here 90% of children with a physical disability are in mainstream schools. So actually, if we're talking about special schools, that's great. We should be talking about special schools, but we should also be talking about the 90% of children who are just not in special schools and not perhaps with teachers who have the first idea what to do, because it's not the children that they come across every day. And therefore, and they're not perhaps used to thinking outside the box as many teachers in special schools are. So yeah, it's also getting that mindset that the children we are trying to work with are not necessarily the children that might first come to mind when we're talking about children with disabilities.
Yes. And I actually recently, well, within this past semester, got a call from someone who was interested in the one-handed clarinet for a student, but they couldn't afford it. And at that time, I didn't realize you would ship to the U.S. And I do remember
got enough instruments.
Yeah, and I do remember when I first ordered the clarinet from Peter, my plan had been to travel with a group who was playing in, I can't remember where, but we were going to play nearby. And I was going to travel and meet up and get the instrument and bring it home. But then my medical team decided I wasn't ready to travel at that point. So then when I called Peter and asked him to mail it to me, it was a big source of stress for him because he had never mailed one and he was positive it was going to break on the way.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't sure if, the fact that my clarinet made it undamaged, was calmer or but I may have to call these people back and tell them that if they still need the instrument, they might be able to contact you, and if you have one, because the problem with the clarinet is, do you need the right-handed one or the left-handed one?
Exactly. And that's the same with a lot of our woodwind ones. You can buy, a school could buy a right-handed one, and the next child who needs it actually might need the left-handed one, and there's no there's no change in the child. We just have to
no, not at all. All right. Well, I have really enjoyed having you. Do you have any final recommendations for our music teachers in the U.S. who are trying to teach our students with upper limb deficiency?
One thing I would suggest, if you, so we have a website, www.ohmi.org.uk, but we also have a site called OHMI Connect, which you can find from our main website. And that is it's free to access. It's a really good resource to find out what's out there. So you can go in as though you're a teacher with a child with a particular set of needs, or you could go in as a flute teacher or a violin teacher and find out all the things relating to flute or violin or whatever instrument you're interested in. So definitely have a look at that, just to get some ideas as to what's out there and see if that's suitable for the children that you're trying to work with. And please do, if we've got questions, please do always ask. I don't mind whether in the US or the UK or wherever you are, please ask and we'll do our very best to help.
All right, thank you so much. This is such an amazing resource, and as far as I know, it's unique in the world currently. So you are doing such amazing work, and I am personally a recipient of the benefits that you're reaping, and so I can't speak highly enough of you. And I'm so glad that you were able to share with my podcast audience and give them another tool to put in their tool belt, because sometimes with upper limb deficiency, it's just having the equipment. When I walk into band rehearsal with a one-handed clarinet, that's an entirely different experience than when I walk in and look at you like you need to help me out.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
All right, well, thank you so much. And this brings us to the end of our episode. Thank you to Rachel for joining us to discuss the One-Handed Musical Instrument Trust. We hope you feel inspired, equipped, and ready to work with the disabled musicians in your community.